In today's lesson, we're going to talk about globalization, and we'll be on page 6 of your interactive notebook. As we get started with globalization, let's take a quick look at what it actually is. We'll watch a short video to explain it to us.
Globalization is a widely discussed topic. It is therefore not all that easy to explain such a complicated term in simple words. Let's start from the beginning with the background to globalization. Advances in technology, such as mobile phones, aeroplanes, telephones, and the internet, have made the growth of transport and communication networks possible. Amongst other things, this means that people and countries can exchange information and goods more quickly and in a less complicated way. This process is called globalization. Globalization comes from globe and means the worldwide coming together of countries and nations. Let's look at an example. Companies used to manufacture products in their home countries, just like the companies Profi TV and Supercolor, who produce televisions in country A. Their products are in direct competition with each other, but both companies pay the same salaries and production costs. They have the same customers, use similar suppliers, and sell televisions at similar prices. In short, the same conditions apply to both companies. So far, so good. Due to technical, cultural, and economic developments that have come about through globalization, other companies which manufacture products under different conditions can now offer their products in country A too. That's why a company from country B can sell televisions here at a lower price because they were produced for less. The local firms Supercolor and Profi TV have to react to withstand the competition. And so the world grows closer together, and there is an active exchange of goods between countries. More affordable products are available for more people. However, not only does an exchange of products and economic goods take place, but also of services, knowledge, cultural goods, and even languages. All of these individual elements are closely linked and influence each other. But where there is light, there is also shadow. Because of globalization and this intense exchange of goods, people and the environment often suffer. If a company decides to move production to an economically disadvantaged country, people in industrialized countries lose their jobs. At the same time, job opportunities open up to many locals in the economically disadvantaged country. Many people in these countries work for very little money in comparison to those in industrialized countries. Therefore, they often remain poor and more often than not do not have sufficient insurance, social insurance, or health insurance cover. A further disadvantage of globalization is ecological problems such as climate change. The use of aeroplanes, ships, and lorries to transport goods over international borders is constantly on the increase. This causes more carbon dioxide to be released into the atmosphere, which, in turn, is the main cause of global warming. Even national environmental standards are ignored. This is a further cost factor in the worldwide international site competition, which should be kept as low as possible to be attractive for a company. There are therefore many sides to globalization, which affect almost all aspects of life, causing me to think that the chain of positive and negative effects will continue to grow further. What's important is to realize that globalization itself is neither good nor bad. It just depends how people deal with all the new possibilities in the future.
So in summary, globalization is global trade. Trading products, services, ideas, cultures, all of these things. In recent years, there's been a lot of debate on whether or not globalization is good for the world. So again, globalization represents your growing integration of economies and societies, cultures, religions, ideas, ideologies, you name it, around the world. And it also gives you the ability to get products from other nations For example, different types of food, different types of clothes, music, so on and so forth. There are a few positive, or there's many positives of globalization, and there's many cons. Here are just a few. Positives of globalization include the accessibility of goods, ideas, people, and technology, and it also promotes economic growth. In some cases, it reduces poverty, and it also encourages global cooperation to solve environmental problems. Some cons or negatives of globalization include damaging the environment and poverty still existing globally. So let's talk about a few categories and talk about how globalization possibly has helped or hurt. So has globalization helped or hurt economic development? There's going to be people who are for and against this. There's going to be two sides to everything, so we're going to analyze both. Those who feel that there's a cost on economic development, cost meaning it's a negative. They would argue that poverty still exists. Less developed nations, or our developing nations, still are experiencing extreme poverty. And healthcare and education around the world are still not accessible for all. Those who would argue that the economic development is benefited by globalization would say that the developed nations have an increased standard of living, that there's a spread of jobs and industry around the world. Next, let's talk about whether or not globalization has helped or hurt the environment. Those who feel that globalization is a cost on the environment argue that there's strong pollution, climate change, and emissions from transportation of all these goods moving around the world. Those who argue the other side, saying that it has benefited the environment, say that some nations do focus heavily on reusing and recycling goods. Does globalization enrich or threaten local cultures? Those who are in favor of globalization would argue that the interdependence of nations working together is very important. We've got the merging of food, movies, entertainment across these borders. And we have a way of sharing cultural ways through cultural diffusion. And so it enriches these cultures and spreads them around the world. Those who argue against it would say that some view it as cultural imperialism of Western ideals, meaning the Western nations are pushing their ideas into other nations. And that ultimately weakens the local cultures and traditions of smaller nations. And finally, we see that there's possibly the rapid extinction of certain languages. Again, as we've been talking about in this presentation, globalization is something that's a hot topic these days. There are people who are for and against it. It comes down to what your opinion is. Thank you for watching, and make sure to enter this into your interactive notebook.